gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, welcome to the Marvelous Podcast. Rachel. Ben, I'm feeling pretty freaking good today. You know why?
Because the sun is shining.
The sun is shining.
Now the tank is clean.
The sun is shining, the tank is clean, and we are getting out of... The tank is clean. The tank is clean, Ben, and I think it's ready to be filled with knowledge, words, and just good attitudes. I'd fill every tank I could with Ben.
I love good attitudes. Good. Encouragement is what we are going for.
I love passion.
I love passion. This is Ben. I approve this message.
Benjamin, what did we just watch?
Keagan.
Don.
We just watched The Dark Knight. Who we did figure out who he was by the end of this movie. Both Keagan and I were a little bit worried because we heard it was a Batman movie because Batman Begins came before this. We got on the streaming service and we found what we're told was the next movie, but we were like, hey, this doesn't have Batman in it
exactly
in the title, which has never been done before. And so we were really, really concerned, and we were like, oof, I don't know if we should watch this movie. So we turned it on, started watching it, and then it took us a little while because Batman isn't in it for a little while. Yeah, we thought that it was It Chapter 3 because there was a ton of clowns in this movie. Needless to say, eventually we got to Batman, and we were still confused on why it was called The Dark Knight, but we knew it was a Batman movie. And then because of somebody by the name of Gim Jordan at the end of this movie, he tells us who the Dark Knight is. And spoiler alert for those of you who are just coming onto this podcast, it was Batman.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. But I think that, that's the issue I have with this movie. It doesn't make a lot of sense, Like, why? Why would you do The Dark Knight?
Well, isn't that just a testament to Christopher Nolan, though? Most people don't understand his movies.
Well, I mean, honestly. Well, and Christopher Nolan's a sucky director. And so...
I agree. He has a weird haircut.
He does have a weird thing. And this movie steals a lot of its cinematography from a movie called Inception, which I think that was really lame of Christopher Nolan to do. Like, what a thief, What an absolute jerk. Dark Knight's pretty good.
So... It's interesting because normally when we get this far into a series, so we're at the 6th movie in this series, and normally when we get to this spot, I'm like, oh, I'm a little tuckered out. Like, this is too much Star Wars. This is too much Marvel. Honestly, it was never really too much Marvel for me, just because I absolutely love Marvel.
Well, after Marvel, it's like varying experiences, right?
After we were done with Marvel, I was like, okay, I'd like to do something else, but I wasn't like tired of it.
Yeah.
With Batman, once we got to Batman and Robin, I was so exhausted. I was like, I don't know if I like Batman that much as a character.
And that's a bad movie, where after it, you're like, I don't think I like this franchise anymore.
But we got to Batman Begins. Batman Begins was wonderful.
Yeah.
Go listen to our podcast about Batman Begins.
Top notch.
And then we got to The Dark Knight, and I left Keegan's house after this movie, and I sat in my car for a moment before turning it on, and I thought to myself, Batman may be my favorite superhero.
Wow.
Which is big, because I'm not like huge into the DC universe.
Yeah.
I'm big into certain DC characters. Shout out Doomsday. He's the best villain of all time. Ruined by Batman vs. Superman. Which is probably why I don't like Batman.
Tadpole Day. As he's known. Frogman.
At this point, I absolutely love Batman. I could go into 4 more movies just like this one about Batman. They don't have that, sadly. But today we're going to talk to you about The Dark Knight.
Does this movie make you more excited for the Matt Reeves Batman or less excited?
I haven't thought about it.
Really?
Well, mainly just because it feels like a trilogy of its own.
Yeah.
And we talked about that.
It does.
When we get to the next movie, after we finish that, it will feel like a bookend to that series, and I will feel satisfied. You never know. I may really, really enjoy the new Batman. I'm not really looking forward to it. I don't really have any feelings towards it right now on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. What is your favorite part of this movie?
This movie?
I'm gonna hit you with that big boy right off the cricket stick.
This movie.
Yes. The Dark Knight, what is your absolute favorite part of The Dark Knight?
No, my favorite part is this movie.
Oh. Well done, sir. But you can't. I'm going to say no to that. You take your funny jokes and you get them out the door.
This movie has so many parts that I could pick from. Even just from the little, whatever doesn't kill you just makes you stranger.
Oh.
Love that.
Yeah.
It's a great reveal of the Joker. But I will have to say, it is the ending monologue. One, it is
Goosebumps,
beautiful,
man. Like all the way from your toes.
I watched
to your
it twice.
fingers. Dude.
At the end of this movie, I went in my car, turned on YouTube, watched it again.
Up on YouTube. That's awesome.
It's so well written.
It's such a tight package, man. There's nothing wrong with this movie. Like, I think genuinely, this isn't my favorite movie of all time, but this is as close to a perfect movie as you can get.
Ooh, you said that about Empire Strikes Back.
I did say that about Empire Strikes Back, but I will say, a little caveat, Empire Strikes Back is the perfect sequel. The Dark Knight is just a perfect movie because there are things that The Empire Strikes Back can't do without A New Hope, whereas The Dark Knight doesn't need Batman Begins because the script is so tightly written you can understand what's going on without watching Batman Begins. And I can testament to that because I watched this movie before I watched Batman Begins. This was my introduction into the Nolan trilogy.
Wow.
Yeah, this movie is
okay.
Just about flawless.
But isn't it wonderful that Batman Begins came before this movie?
It is wonderful that Batman Begins came before this movie. It's one of those things where you can almost watch this trilogy in any sort of order. Like, if you watch The Dark Knight Rises, well, maybe not The Dark Knight Rises. I haven't seen that one in a while. But I feel like if you start with The Dark Knight, you can just watch that. And it's like if you want more, you want another adventure in this world, you can go into The Dark Knight Rises. Or if you want context for the stuff that happens in The Dark Knight, you have Batman Begins. But it's weird because rarely do you see a trilogy where the second movie is kind of the linchpin of the series.
That's true.
I think that's very interesting. I think the script is amazing. I think the cinematography is amazing. I think this movie is 2 hours long, 2.5 hours long. One of the best paced stories ever written, in my opinion.
There's never ups and downs in this movie.
Yeah.
If you notice it, at the very, very beginning of this movie, there's just that note. I believe it's a D, like the entire time. And then whenever, side note for you, ladies and gentlemen, whenever Joker is revealed, it changes to a C note.
Oh.
Get it? DC.
Oh, that's cute.
That's funny.
That's me. I was on Marvelous Music, and so you said D to a C, and I'm like, a higher key showing insanity as things are being heightened around him, and you're like, no, it's just reference to DC. It's like,
it's probably both.
Okay, all right.
That scene, if you have it in any other movie, you're gonna have music building while the heist is happening until the very end when there's just a big climax of music. We start out from the very beginning and it's just a slow note, kind of rising a little bit. At certain times, you just can't really hear it. But the entire time, it's just building suspense. When you get to the reveal of the Joker, it doesn't reach a full orchestral...
It just kind of like fizzles out.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, hey, here is the Joker. You're supposed to pay more attention to what's on screen than what is in your ears right now.
Yeah.
And so that's what I freaking love about this movie. Throughout the entire thing, Christopher Nolan did this on purpose. He told Hans Zimmer, because the Batman theme is only played like twice in this movie.
Oh, wow.
He was like, I don't want people to be kind of humming the Batman theme throughout this movie or waiting for it to come around. I want them to be focusing of what's on screen. And so it's really noticeable throughout this entire movie. The undertone is one pace the entire time. And there's little ups every once in a while. Very, very small. Very, very small throughout this entire movie. But it's never like, whoa, it's a roller coaster.
Yeah,
like,
oh my gosh.
Here's this massive thing. No, you feel the weight of what's going on the entire time. Especially whenever Jim Gordon dies. I love that. He's dead in that scene.
Yeah.
Like, you feel it. The characters in the movie feel it, which you don't always feel that. You are swept away in that. You swept away in the emotions so that whenever he does come back, it's a huge, like, it's Gordon.
Yeah.
And it never is like, hey, look at this guy.
Yeah.
You don't know who he is, but, I mean, he's someone.
Yeah.
Because it's not. I mean, he doesn't speak the entire time in that scene, and no one is like, oh, you're the new guy? oh, well, like, where'd you come
Yeah,
from? Like,
exactly.
It takes its time. It knows what it was doing through the entire movie, but it doesn't take you on a ton of ups and downs.
Yeah.
There's always a constant throughout the entire movie, so that suspense is building in your chest.
Yeah, it just lets you ride it. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the way this movie is structured, not only in the music, but in its pacing and in its direction, is that this movie has such a clear vision of what it wanted to be and the story it wanted to tell. And I think it's nice because since it's not structured in these big sweeping orchestral climaxes all the time, every time there's some big reveal, it lets you feel like you're in the dirt with them. You never feel like an audience member. I've never felt so immersed watching a movie quite like I do watching The Dark Knight. Like you feel like you are in the middle of those situations.
Yeah.
And I can't put my finger on what creates that other than just this movie is incredibly well made. This movie has two of my favorite shots of all time and what might be my favorite delivered line of all time, like in the way it's delivered. The two shots are, one, the truck flip, because that looks freaking amazing. And that was a real truck. That was a real truck that they had to flip to get that shot.
And what I love about that scene is that whenever the truck hits the ground, it's not like a huge, like, it's just like it makes the sound a truck would make.
Yes, yeah, and you can see it buckle underneath it, but it doesn't, like, blow up.
Yeah.
Like, this is a very grounded movie. They took that vision of, like, Batman Begins, where it was, okay, how can we take Batman and make him realistic? And I feel like they took that and just totally refined it in this movie of how can we take Batman and still make him feel like Batman, but put it in a realistic setting. And I think little things like that, like the truck doesn't blow up when it flips or shatter into a million pieces. The tumbler ends up getting wrecked. Batman has to have a backup plan. And then you don't see the Batmobile for the rest of the movie. Stuff like that I think is cool, and it works for the tone of this movie. Second shot is in the interrogation scene where Gordon, flips the handcuffs into his hand and he says, if we're going to play games, I need a cup of coffee. And he walks away and Joker's like, oh, the old good cop, bad cop routine. And Gordon's like, oh, not exactly. And he opens the door and shuts it. And then it's this little pause of Joker just sitting in the dark. And then they flick the lights on and Batman's just right behind him. It's so scary. I love it. Like watching that movie for the first time and seeing that scene, I remember just like, you can't help it. Just being like, oh gosh, because he's just there. It's so cool. I love it. And I want to go back to that scene because that scene is amazing as well.
Yeah.
And then my favorite delivered line in this movie is when Joker is first really introduced and he has, his suit on. And he's talking to the guy in the TV and the gangsters who are having their meeting. I love all of Joker's lines in that scene, but something about the line where he says, I know why you have your little group therapy sessions in broad daylight. And the camera kind of slows down to a zoom on his face for just a second. And he says, the Batman. And something about the way Heath Ledger delivers that line of, one, Joker says the Batman, not Batman, where everyone else in the movie has said Batman. Like, they know him. But something about Joker saying the Batman brings this reverence that the Joker has to Batman, almost like a person worshiping a deity in a religion, like the Batman. And he says it with so much disdain in his voice too, but this beautiful hatred that he has for this one thing. And that's the cool thing is, by making it the Batman, he's not making Batman a person, he's making him a thing. And what's interesting is from Batman Begins, that's what Bruce Wayne always wanted Batman to be. He wanted Batman to be an ideal. So here you have this person who's crazy enough to attack an idea rather than a man. And all of that coming together in just that one line and all of that being layered in his delivery truly might be one of the best lines in a movie of all time. Like I look forward to that moment every time I watch this movie. It's perfect.
There's so many lines in this movie that are so well delivered.
Yes.
Like the one that whenever Rachel dies, Batman is sitting up in his penthouse. Alfred made him breakfast, brings it in along with the note from Rachel. They're talking for a moment and then Batman says, "That man in Burma, did you ever catch him?" And Alfred is like, "Yes, sir." And he's like, "How?" And he said, "We burned the forest down." I don't know. It's very interesting. Most movies would put so much emphasis on that line.
Yeah.
To where you knew you're supposed to be listening to this.
Yeah.
But it flows with the movie so much and never steps out of pace when he says that it brings so much more weight to that line.
Yes.
Than a normal movie would.
And it feels like real people having a real conversation. There's
really
not
does.
we burned the forest down. Blah, as Michael Caine looks into the camera lens.
Pans into his face. Or the line where Joker is burning the money and he's about to call the TV station and he says, "This town deserves a better classic criminal." And you're just like, what? That's good. It
is. Good. And it also makes me think of that line Jack Nicholson says where he says, "This town needs an enema." And I like that because I feel like that's kind of Heath Ledger's version of that line.
Do you think he was referring to Nigma? Maybe the Riddler?
I don't think so. Well, an enema is something different.
I know, but it sounds like Nigma. Okay, well, let's talk about this for a moment.
All right, let's talk.
Because as watching this movie, oddly enough, I was trying to find something wrong with this movie. Most of the time, I'm trying to find something really good with the movie. But everyone knows this movie is amazing.
Yeah.
You can talk about this movie all day long. It's been talked about. It's been reviewed 100,000 times. We just want to review it because we are passionate about this movie.
We freaking love movies.
But I was watching through it, and there's one character in this movie where about halfway through, I was like, he is a pointless character. And that is Mr. Reese.
Mr. Reese.
Exactly. You don't
guess,
even know, right?
Yeah.
You're like, who the frick is Mr. Reese? Mr. Reese is the guy who tries to blackmail Christian Bale to Morgan Freeman.
Yes, that guy.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of random that he's in this movie, wouldn't you say?
I suppose.
And he only helps along the plot when he is paid to reveal who the Batman is by the Joker. Come back to that. And so when he's on the TV station, he's about to reveal, and then the Joker says that he's had a change of heart. He doesn't want him to reveal who the Batman is. Ladies and gentlemen, think about that for a moment. How did Mr. Reese get involved with the Joker? How did the Joker know that Mr. Reese knew? Well, what does the name Mr. Reese sound like?
Oh my gosh. It sounds like mystery. Is that guy supposed to be the Riddler?
Yes.
What? I literally got goosebumps. What the heck? Did you read that somewhere? Or is that just you putting the pieces together?
So I put the middle pieces together. I didn't catch the Mr. Reese part. I read that. But I was like, this is really weird because he's in this movie and he seems kind of like a side character that doesn't have anything to do with this movie. But the more that I watched it, the more I was like, how the frick did he get involved with the Joker? And then I read up that Christopher Nolan wanted to do another movie and he didn't know really if he wanted to use the Riddler or not, but he kind of wanted to. And so he put him in there, but he didn't want him to be like, hey, this is the Riddler,
right.
This is Enigma. And so what he did was he changed his name to Mr. Reese, which sounds like mysteries.
That is crazy.
I thought you'd appreciate that.
I never would have caught that unless you said that to me just now. That's nuts, man. Okay, and that's the other thing. It's like, this movie is so humble. This movie is very grandiose, sure, but again, there's no big sweeping orchestral score to mark moments in this movie. There are in the big moments, but stuff like that, the fact that the Riddler is secretly in this movie is awesome. And this is my 6th time watching this movie. I never would have noticed that. That's fantastic. What an absolutely multi-layered piece of art. It's so good, man. Something I think this movie also does especially well is exploring Batman and Joker and exploring their relationship, but I think specifically focusing on the Joker. I think there's a reason the Joker is the villain that whenever Batman is brought up, people are like, oh, when's the Joker going to show up? Because the Joker is the other side to Batman's coin. And the last person who played Joker was Jack Nicholson at this point. And it was interesting because Heath Ledger was made a concerted effort to make his Joker different than Jack Nicholson because he loved that performance so much, but he really wanted to make this character his own. And where I think it's interesting, Jack Nicholson's Joker, he wants to kind of bring everybody into his party. I think this Joker's interesting because I think there's a part of that, but I think Alfred says it best where he is talking to Bruce, and Bruce is like, why would he do that? And he says, some men just want to watch the world burn. And I think that is such an excellent description of who the Joker is.
Yeah.
Just this force of chaos. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what happens to him. Even in the scene where Two-Face is there and he's like, you live and you die, he doesn't get excited until he says you die. Like,
and he says, now we're talking.
Now we're talking. Like, as though he wants to be put an end to, but until then, he's going to cause as much chaos as possible.
Well, he even says that. He says he's an agent of chaos.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also interesting because his main villain, the man who he has decided is going to be like his focus in life, is the one man who would never kill him. But he's fine with that because he's been given purpose. He's an agent of chaos still, but now he has someone specifically who he can use to torture and challenge his ideals of his chaos with. Because, another like amazing line, because Batman is an immovable object and is the perfect other side to Joker's unstoppable force. The perfect representations of chaos and order. I love this.
I'm going to hit you with something that I just thought of.
Hit me.
So, you know, in the final scene with Joker and the Batman's looking at Joker. The Joker is upside down, right?
Yes.
And he's swinging back and forth, and there's that sweet camera that just rotates.
Yes.
And so it looks like Joker is right side up, but really he's upside down.
Upside down.
And we talk about how, like, the Joker, well, Batman made the Joker. Joker kind of makes the Batman, especially in the Batman 89 movie. I think it's really cool. So picture this with me for a moment. If you are standing outside and the sun is shining on you and your shadow falls on the ground, okay? Your shadow is connected to you by your feet. When you look at it like a person is standing like right there.
Yeah.
But if someone across from you is looking at that shadow, it's technically upside down. If you take a picture, it's an upside down person, which is really, really cool. In that scene, Batman and Joker are so closely connected that Batman is almost the shadow of Joker. This movie just freaking blows my mind.
It's so ridiculously well made.
It's astonishing because there's that line that Joker delivers where he says, I don't want to kill you. He's like, what would I do without you? It's true for Batman too.
Yeah.
Because what would Batman really do without the Joker? I mean, they made each other.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting because there's a line at the end of Batman Begins that I think sets up this movie beautifully, where Gordon says, what about escalation? You know, you bring a big gun, someone wants to bring a bigger gun.
So you start carrying semi-automatics, they start carrying automatics. That's in Batman Begins.
Yeah,
very
exactly.
End, yeah.
So that's in Batman Begins, and that is a perfect setup to this. Because again, it's that theme that all of these Batman movies have been wrestling with. It's been a joy seeing each of them wrestle with it in a different way of, if Batman wasn't around, would the Joker have showed up? I don't think so.
No.
But Gotham still needs Batman. But Batman is creating these situations that are putting people's lives in danger. So it's like, who is in the wrong at that point? Like, would it be the person creating the problem or the person who's taking advantage of the situation? And it's so interesting because this movie doesn't answer that. It just kind of lays that idea at your feet and is like, I don't know. Like, what do you think about this? And I think that's exactly why this movie is so good, because it's an excellent superhero movie. It's an excellent movie in general, but it poses such an interesting philosophical question of, in a world where there is so much bad and so much good, which one do you yield to if the good is creating the bad? And I love it because this movie ends in the best way, because Batman says, screw that. And I love that, like, one of the last things Batman says before he makes that choice of like, turn the dogs on me, is he just says, Joker can't win. And the way he says that is so desperate, of like, after all of this, like, the Joker can't win in this. And I love it because in that way of Batman being this amazing hero is creating these problems. he in turn allows himself to become the villain in the mind of Gotham so that this won't happen again. And it's freaking awesome.
And the Joker does win in this movie.
He does kind of win in this movie.
No, he doesn't kind of win. He does.
But he did also prove that the city is full of good people willing to do what's right. What do you think about Batman in this movie?
I like how he's pushed to his limits in this movie.
I do too.
I think it's cool. This was actually pointed out to me. In Batman Begins, when the symbol is shown for the first time, you know, it's all the bats flurrying.
Yeah.
And then there's that, like, just golden tan background. In that movie, Batman has to overcome bats. Like, that's his biggest fear. That's his thing. That's kind of what makes Batman who Batman is in that movie. And when that same symbol shows up for the very first time in this movie, it's being consumed by blue fire. And in this movie, Batman is tested by fire in some cases in this movie. And then in The Dark Knight, it's like a bunch of cracks almost in ice.
Or The Dark Knight Rises.
Or Dark Knight Rises, yeah. To come together to make the bat symbol. Well, Batman is broken in that movie. He's cracked. I mean, his back is broken. And so each symbol is foreshadowing what Batman is overcoming to become this symbol. And I love that.
It's good.
And so in this movie, he really is tested by fire this entire time. I mean, even at the very beginning, Batman kind of gets wrecked.
What, by the dogs?
By the dogs, by the fact that he's trying to use his gadget to open up the van.
Yeah.
And it just gets stuck.
Just
and
not
he hits
working.
a freaking pillar. Like, he gets absolutely destroyed at the beginning of this movie. And I love that about this movie because you never have that sense of, oh, he's Batman. He's going to come through.
Yeah, he'll be fine.
Like, he's going to be okay. We're going to see some cool action, which I never want in this movie.
Yeah.
I never want an action sequence of Batman railing people. I am more invested in the story and in the character progression than I am in action sequences, which is bonkers to think about because this is a superhero movie.
Yeah, 100%. For me, the only movie where I can say that is these movies. I remember watching these movies when I was younger and I was like, these are boring. Like, there's no action in it. But now that as an adult, you can watch this and appreciate the story and appreciate the artistry of it and everything that's happening. I definitely agree with you in that these movies don't need big bombastic, fight scenes and all that jazz. That being said, though, I think I would be disappointed if these were the only Batman movies that existed. Because, and I'm gonna hit you with a curveball, I don't like this movie, but I like this scene in Batman vs. Superman, where Batman is saving Martha Kent in the warehouse, and he is just taking everybody out. That is my favorite scene in that movie, easily. We need a Batman like that as well, in my opinion, because there are two sides to that. There is the slow, gritty Batman that you can have, but also Batman is a superhero, and I want to see him do superhero things. But as far as this movie goes, this movie can't have those big bust into the warehouse, take out 5 guys all at once. Like, each, whenever there is fighting in this movie, it's very thought out. It's very methodical. It's very like, he's keeping his hands up and he's fighting them like an actual person would fight another person. And I appreciate that. What do you think about Two-Face in this movie?
I was just about to say that.
Oh my gosh.
Aaron Eckhart does an amazing job in this movie, and I think he was an excellent cast for Two-Face.
Definitely.
His performance somewhat gets overshadowed or takes a back seat because the Joker is in this movie. Yeah. And the Joker, what I told you, everybody in this movie is kind of at their peak. Like, they are acting super well. No one is a bad actor in this movie. But the Joker is head and shoulders above every single actor in this movie. Yeah. That everyone else kind of gets overshadowed. And so Aaron Eckhart, I think, delivers one of the best performances he's ever had. Even in that scene where they're in the court and the guy tries to kill him and he's like, "But Your Honor, I'm not done." Like, that's a fun, that's a fun little Two-Face thing. I think his slow transition to the dark side. I was trying to do a Morgan Freeman accent.
The dark side.
The dark side. Who Morgan Freeman's in this movie?
Yeah, he is, and he does great.
I think it's really, really well done. I think it's really cool how it's set up as the viewer. He knows the entire time what he's transitioning to. The viewer also is the only person who knows that Harvey Dent is Two-Face, along with Gordon and Batman.
Yeah.
The rest of the world doesn't. Even to the very end of this movie, they don't know. I love how it transitions whenever the Joker comes in and is talking to him. That's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
Because he just looks at him and he goes, hi.
This creepy little wig.
It's a creepy smile, creepy wig.
Yeah.
And they just sit down and they talk. And Joker is just kind of being honest in that situation.
Yeah.
He's letting Harvey Dent choose who he wants to be. And then that's when he fully becomes Two-Face and he starts capping people with a revolver.
Dude.
Which is insane.
He starts seeking his justice.
But
it's interesting because you also see his point. Two-Face is very sympathetic in this movie. Like, he goes about it all the wrong way, but I think Two-Face is a more relatable villain than the Joker. And that's another great thing about this movie is you have those two kinds of villains, the ultimate chaos and then also the sympathetic villain because you understand his point of view.
What I appreciate most about Two-Face is in the very last scene that he's in, and he's captured Gordon's family, and he wants to make Gordon pay. The Batman comes in, and he does the coin flip for Batman, and shoots him, and Batman falls very stoically. And then, who's next? It's Two-Face.
Oh, that's right.
That's what I appreciate most about his character, is it really is just...
It's about what's fair.
Justice. 50, he says he gets the same chance she did, 50-50.
Yeah.
And he flips the coin because he doesn't even want to live. His family has been taken away.
And it's interesting that he flips the coin for himself before he goes to shoot Gordon's son.
And that's what I appreciate so much about Two-Face. Further diving into that scene, because that scene caps off the movie perfectly for me.
Yeah.
Is they're doing their whole thing. Well, in the end, Batman tackles Harvey Dent off of the building, catches Jordan's son. Jordan catches Gordon's son. And there's that shot of the coin falling right side up, and it's the good side of the coin, the side that hasn't been burned, foreshadowing what's about to be told by Jim Gordon. What I love about that scene is that Batman and Two-Face both fall in that scene. Two-Face falls to his death, and it's like the ultimate downfall. But you have the coin falling, which is foreshadowing that the entire Gotham City isn't going to know that he falls. He's still going to be the White Knight. Batman also falls in this scene. Even though it's he is finally the hero, the viewer knows that it's his downfall because the rest of the city will know that he is the villain. They will think that he killed those cops and those people and he will run. And I love the contrast of the White Knight and the Dark Knight. Even at the very last shot is Batman driving into a white light.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Becoming who Harvey Dent was. It's just this movie blows your freaking mind in so many different ways. And there's so many layers that you can talk about that we're not going to talk about all of them, obviously, because we don't have enough time.
Right.
But it's just, it's a wonderful movie to watch.
100%. And I think that contrast between dark and light and, white and dark, I think that's such an interesting theme throughout the movie because Harvey is compared to white and Bruce Wayne is compared to dark so often. Like even when the ballerina, Bruce Wayne's date, she goes, "Is Harvey Dent the Caped Crusader?" And she holds the white menu above his face. And and it even says all throughout the movie, Harvey Dent, the White Knight of Gotham. Bruce says that is the face of Gotham's bright future. And it just makes this character of Harvey Dent so tragic because he truly was Gotham's best chance. Like he was what Gotham needed. I think it's interesting because I think Aaron Eckhart, and I'd be willing to bet this was on purpose, would have played an excellent Batman. I think that was probably part of their casting process. Don't quote me on that. That's just something that I think. But what's interesting is I noticed something that I'd never noticed before, and it's when Gordon is giving the memorial for Harvey Dent. At the end of the movie, the music is starting to rise, and he says about Harvey, we're saying goodbye to the hero that Gotham needed, but not the one it deserved. And when they're talking about Batman, he says, he's like, why are they chasing him? And he says, because he's the hero we deserve, but not the one it needs right now. even in that last little line of flipping those lines together, of this idea of who Harvey was, is what Gotham needs. But this man on the other side of that, who is willing to do everything for what's right and for his people, that's what Gotham deserves. That's what people deserve to have. And it's perfect, man. It's such a good contrasting of lines.
I'll hit you with another one.
Hit me. But not really.
I'll hit you after.
All right. We'll put it on the social medias. You just slap me with facts.
When Gordon is giving the memorial service for Harvey Dent, at the very end, he says he really was Gotham's knight shining. But he never says white knight. Because he's referring to Batman in that freaking scene.
It's awesome.
Just let it sink in, you know? Let it sink in how amazing this movie is.
Yeah, even in the way that they redesigned Batman's costume. It goes from a regular superhero costume to plate armor, like a knight. That literally hit me 2 seconds ago.
Out like a light. We need to dive into Heath Ledger for just a short period of time. Yeah. Because one, obviously Heath Ledger died before this movie was even released.
Yeah.
Which was, it was crazy. Everything surrounding this movie was really, really crazy. But most people assume, and also think to this day, that character acting in this role, and he got so deep and so depressed that he couldn't get out of it, and like that's why he died. He
did lock himself in the motel room and all that stuff that you've heard, like that's all true. That did happen.
Well, he did that before the movie.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. He was never character acting though. Like he was never in character when he was off screen. And it's really cool to hear the cast talk about him in this movie, because Heath Ledger at this time had only really done like teenage romance movies.
Yeah.
And A Knight's Tale and comedies. And everyone, and I mean everyone in the entire world, when they saw Heath Ledger was cast as the Joker, was like, oh, this movie's going to be terrible.
Yeah.
Awful. There's even a couple cast members who were like, we weren't really sure.
Yeah.
And then they say he got in there and there was never a doubt in their mind. For example, the first 2 days that certain characters started shooting, the Joker, Heath Ledger, wasn't shooting that day. He wasn't going to be on screen at all. He still got into full makeup and full costume for that entire day to kind of have the weight of the situation looming over them. And he didn't even have to do that. I think Heath Ledger he knocks it out of the park in so many little ways behind the scenes, even to the fact where there's one line that he's delivering, and Gamble, one of the crime bosses who gets like really upset with the Joker, he's in the movie for maybe 5 minutes total. Heath Ledger was giving a line and he like looked at Gamble and he was like, was that good? He was like, I could do it like differently. Like, what do you think of this? And the guy was just like, that sounded great. But Heath Ledger was such a humble dude, according to these guys.
Yeah, and he rolled with the punches perfectly. The like cheek prosthetic that he has on his face, it kept falling off, and so moisture had to keep being reapplied to it. That's why he licks his lips. He had to take things that were given to him and he turned it into a tick of the Joker, because he had to lick his lips to keep his prosthetic moist so that it stayed on. I just think that's interesting. Even in that scene with the pencil, you can see his heart in the midst of that performance, because that guy had to get his head slammed into the table so many times to get that scene to look good. But what's interesting is they said the one time Heath Ledger broke character on set was that take happened and the guy like didn't get up right away. And so he was like, oh my gosh, like, are you okay? And was checking on him. So for the rest of the filming, Heath Ledger put his hand on his forehead when he slammed the table so that his hand was getting hit on the table. And if you see, it's very quick. The actual take that they used is his hand starts behind him and then he slams his head down. They go down to chase the head hitting the table and he's pulling his head back up. You can see his hand is on the guy's forehead. And that was the take that they used. I think it's interesting. What a freaking tragedy. And I was reading about how Heath Ledger passed away, and the tale that was told was that Heath Ledger got so deep and so depressed and ended up killing himself. It has come out that was not the case. Heath Ledger had insomnia for a long, long time and a couple other medical things, and he had a bad habit of mixing his sleep pills with other medication, but he'd been doing that since he was like a kid. And his family had said his state of mind was totally fine. Like, he never gave any sort of inkling of depression. Like, he was still the happy, regular guy that he always had been. And he was having trouble sleeping one night, and his sister even told him, don't mix your medication. That's not good for you. And he was like, oh, fine, whatever. And that was the night he died, because he took a dosage of too many sleep pills, and then I forget what the other thing he took was, but they didn't mix in his system properly, and he ended up passing away in the night. Horrible, man. Yeah. So freaking tragic. And I know that the loss of the person is much more important than the loss of, the things that he brings to the film. But man, just tragedy, man, especially after this performance, what is easily one of the greatest performances ever.
Hands down. I every time I watch this movie, I am astonished by what Heath Ledger did with that character, because we already had a great Joker.
Yeah.
We had Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
And everyone considered him head and shoulders above any other person who'd ever done Joker.
Yeah.
And they thought that no one else could really do it well, especially Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger comes in, puts a new take on the Joker, and is now considered better than Jack Nicholson's Joker.
Yeah.
That's crazy what he did with that.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a bright, shining morning while we talk about a very dark night.
And a very long podcast.
And a very long podcast. Thanks for making it to the end if you've made it this far. And if you haven't, don't worry about them. They weren't real fans to begin with.
Yeah. Jim Gordon's amazing.
Jim Gordon is amazing. I'm saving all my talking about him until The Dark Knight Rises, because I feel like that's really where that's Gordon's time to shine in that movie. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here with us. Follow us on the socials. Email us at marvelouspod@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at The Marvelous Podcast. We love you so much. Leave us a review. Leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And my gosh, Josh, you look amazing today.
Yeah. And Steve, go check out Marvelous Music. You know you want to.
You know you want to. And Piper, thank you for blessing us with your time. Thank you so much for everything that you do for us. We hope that we do enough for you. Hope that you bless your ears. Good evening.
And good night.